Hello, welcome to the third episode of Body Image Coach. I'm joined by Olivia and Jenny again, and today we're going to be talking about the impact of negative body image words and the power that those can have, particularly for young people. So, as a mum, I'm going to be really interested in this topic. So, what have you got to tell us, guys?
Yeah, I mean, negative body image words. It's funny because I don't think we realize what we say. A good example is an easy example would be the word hate. So if you are around your child and you're using the word hate a lot, and not even around body image, but if hate is part of your vocabulary, what are you using hate in? So sometimes it could be, I hate it when this happens. But if you're using it regularly, you're more likely to use it on yourself as well. So, starting off with, I hate it when that happens could escalate into, I hate it when I do that. I hate it when I think like that way, which would then may lead to, I hate it when I look at myself that way. I hate myself when I do that. And, you can see how it escalates just using something like the word hates for a long period of time. So personally, I try and leave the word hate out of my vocabulary as much as possible because it spreads. Hate spreads.
Yeah.
Hate
I have to
spreads
say, I
inwards.
am totally guilty. And one of the things I know I say a lot is if something goes wrong, like something minor, and it's in my view, it's a little bit of a joke thing, but I'll be like, oh, I hate my life, and you just don't realize, do you, that you and your kids are like sponges. They just
Yeah.
absorb absolutely everything. So,
Yeah, especially if you verbalize things. So I'm quite a verbal person in terms of, I live on my own, well, with my cats, but I think because I've got cats, I kind of talk to them. So when there's other people around, I think people are more verbal. And so what you're thinking inside then becomes someone else's world because they're listening to it as well. So if your kids are around you a lot and they're listening to you just verbalizing internal thoughts, you're probably not even aware that what you are saying sometimes. I don't know. How do you feel about that, Jenny?
I have a long list.
Of what?
a long list of words or a
Well,
long.
no, just ideas on this really,
Oh, okay.
Okay.
which I'm going to throw out to you and sort of chip in where you want to. I
Yeah.
was thinking about this topic and the words we use for ourselves about our own bodies, which of course you're covering all this, I'm aware, but um, and that also extends to, say, in a family, the words that are used by the parents to one another. Again, about the bodies, and as you say, Olivia, they're just generalized negative words. I had a friend whose husband used to sort of berate her about the size of her bottom,
Oh,
and it was done in as a joke to some extent,
mm.
but I know that around the children had a big impact.
What
Um,
happened? Do you mind me asking how much of an impact did that have on the children?
I won't say any more other than it was huge.
Okay. Yeah.
It was a big impact.
Mm.
Um, I think the other thing that I kind of put my hands up to, as you did, Jane, my husband and I, when we were much younger and our children were small, this is a terrible thing, but we weren't very kind about other people.
Mm.
And we would sort of drive around or people would walk past us and we would make comments, you know, or we'd give people names. And as I said, I mean, it's a horrible thing to own up to doing, but we did do
I
it,
love I love the fact that you're owning up to this because a lot of us do it internally.
Oh yeah, oh yes, you do it internally. Yes, I mean, it reminds me of taking my elderly father out when he used to go to the hospital, and he used to sit in the waiting room and make comments about people, and it was to be like, no, and
So
but
yeah, and that, sorry to interrupt, that's really interesting as well because I mean, this, we're probably talking years ago now because I know you're a therapist, you've been doing this a really long time. But when you was doing that with your husband, name shaming and things like that, was it your dad's voice that you could hear doing it?
I can't blame it on them.
No,
I can't blame
and
it on
it's
my
not.
parents, actually. I don't think so. I think it was just a groove that we got caught in. It was
Yeah,
like a hobby, you know, it's just a really nasty, insidious thing.
yeah,
Um,
I
so I think
don't think
that's
it's uncommon.
no,
I grew up in a household where we were quite judgmental about others, and I don't think we were unusual in that,
no.
because I think when you watch TV or you read magazines or newspapers, I think it's quite pervasive. People
mm,
do comment on other people's appearance all the
Yeah.
time.
I think it's worse now with
Yeah,
social media,
yeah,
because
yeah.
it, you know, the impact is so much greater. So in terms of, you
Mm,
know, the work I do in schools, um, this is just a drip effect, and it's because it's spread across social media. The children that are sort of, that's the way their families have led them to be, they're doing it indiscriminately to other children in their environment, you know, and
yeah.
it's horrible. And then the words we use about our children, I thought that, you know when you're really exasperated, and sometimes we inadvertently or deliberately say things which are really cutting. And one of the words that, you know, is one of the words that we particularly come up with people have body image issues is disgusting. You
mm,
know, and sometimes parents will say, "You disgust me."
yeah.
They do,
That's a very, very powerful word, isn't it?
You know
isn't
Disgust.
what?
it?
And I think
That
it's
reminds.
overused, totally
Yeah.
overused in
Yes.
And it's funny because that word, I remember back in the day when I was very thin and I had a lot of difficulties with my body image. And obviously, I couldn't tell my parents because it wasn't, we didn't have that kind of relationship. But I remember my dad looking at me one day and he said, it was almost like I was reading his mind. And in his mind, through his eyes, I could tell that he was disgusted with how I looked. And that really
Yeah.
pained me. He never said anything. It was just, so sometimes it's not even about the words, is it? Sometimes it's the look.
Yeah.
yeah.
But you can give someone a certain look and
Yes.
it says such a lot.
And again, it's likely to be that this is something that we as parents are so used to that we don't even notice we're doing it. I
Yeah.
think this is a real fundamental, and if we could catch this really early on, before our children are kind of bathed in this negativity. And that,
Mm.
I was working with a parent at the weekend, whose child is really struggling. And I had a session with the parent to sort of try and unpick what's going on, because children can't get away from their parents. You know, if you're working with an adult whose sort of brain is suffused with negativity, you've got something to work with there. You can do some real work. But if a child or a young adult or young person who's living with parents who are berating them, or living in an environment with other people that are saying really caustic things to them, I can't help them escape from that. It's just
Yeah.
ongoing. So I think the vast majority of parents deeply love their children, but they don't necessarily recognize the impact of what they say, or don't even
Yeah.
see it. You know, it can be like, well, my parents said that kind of thing to me, so it must be I'm
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And
And
it's funny, yeah, as well, because my brother was the one that, my middle brother, he was the one that was the one with the negative voice. And so I still hear my brother's voice in my head.
yeah,
So if I'm being judgmental to someone, obviously I've done a lot of work and I don't judge anybody, but so every now and again something will creep in. And I'm aware enough now to hear that it's in my brother's voice. And so I challenge that inner voice, that part of me that it doesn't feel like me. It's like my brother lives inside my head
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
And I think siblings can be, it
Mhm.
can be just as difficult with siblings because they also are learning how to regulate themselves, aren't they? And what they say. So
yeah,
it's not just parents.
yeah. Absolutely. And it can be grandparents. So my grandson he's 3, and he had his hair cut for the 3rd time, and he's had quite long, not I mean a longer haircut, and it's now sort of a proper little boy's haircut. And his great-granddad walked in and just said, "Don't like your haircut."
Oh, that's terrible.
And he looks, I mean, he looks great with his haircut. I don't know that he heard it, but it's just, how do you stop other people making judgments and speaking them aloud? And I think it's important as parents to defend our children against other people's stuff.
And on the back end of that, though, you will get a lot of parents that say, well, we need to be truthful and honest with our children. You know, there's a real debate there, isn't there?
But what is truthful? I mean, that's a judgment. The judgment is, I don't like the haircut.
Yeah, I mean, that's the example. So let's say, for example, someone is putting on a lot of weight. They have binge eating disorder, for example, and let's say they're age 13, and the parents are being very judgmental towards them. And when you try and approach the parent and say, you know, obviously your words are having a big impact on them in a negative way, they might say, well, they need to hear it because they need to lose weight. So it's, you know, there's that end of the stick.
Certainly. And that's such a delicate issue, because it really makes my heart sink when I hear what you say. And I know that happens, but that's a whole very sensitive and compassionate re-education program, really, that needs to happen there. and that might be very unwelcome, because, and sadly what could happen then is that continues, that dynamic continues, where there's an unsupportive, uncompassionate approach, and then you get sort of 5 years down the line, and this young person has developed an eating disorder, and then the parents are likely to suddenly wake up and think, oh, I wonder where that came from, or, you know, and they've got a whole other level of complexity in rescuing their child from that.
Yeah, and I don't know about both of you, but I think it really boils down to awareness, because I know that my mum, for example, has completely changed the way she is now to how she was when I was a child. You know, how by the time she reached being a grandmother, her parenting style was completely different, for the better. And she knows, you know, what she was like and how she is now. And I think for parents as well, especially young parents, I was a very young parent. I had a child at 19, and I've completely changed to how I was now. And I don't know how do you feel, Jane, about, you know, it's parents are still learning, aren't they? And
and also you're trying to unpick things that perhaps didn't go so well in your own childhood, but where's your blueprint for parenting? So often I do find myself reverting to the way that my parents were with me, and they were wonderful parents. I'm not saying they weren't, but everybody has their own things. But the biggest concern for me, I think, as a parent, is how I judge myself and how I verbalize that in front of my children. So I know I am so guilty of standing in front of the mirror and going, oh, I look fat in this, or and I know I've said I look gross, or don't take a picture of me, I'm too fat, and I worry about the impact of that on their self-esteem and their body image, and how they're going to,
so is that
to undo my own issues, to try and present myself in a way. It's hard. It's really hard.
Do you say that verbally, or is it something that you keep to yourself?
No, I say it out loud.
You say it out loud?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and is that around your children as well?
Yeah, unfortunately, I know I do it. I try not to, but sometimes it happens, you know, it just...
Yeah. Well, we're not perfect, are we?
No
one's perfect. And so you have to forgive yourself for the things